Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back. Thanks for checking out this video about Dismal Disney literally killing ESPN, and they can't seem to fix it. This is a wild story. It involves many different parts all working at the same time against any kind of success. ESPN used to be Disney's golden ticket, their sports media powerhouse, their kingdom, their cash cow, whatever you want to call it. It was massive business for the Disney company. And it used to have fans hooked, billions of dollars flowing in, about 4 billion actually, if you look back to 2017. And here we are on March 10th, 11th, whenever you're watching this, looking back at the engine that used to be driving Disney forward, all of a sudden sputtering and spewing black smoke everywhere. Profits are slipping, fans are bailing, and ESPN's making cuts that scream big, big trouble, at least if you're paying attention. Here we go. As is regular practice here, all I want you to do is double check you're still subscribed to the channel, and then whether you're here your first time or your 1000th, take advantage of the free subscription offer I always have. In fact, if you subscribe and turn on all of the notifications with the notification bell down there, you won't miss anything, whether it's a live stream or a video or even a special event. You always want to be informed, and by turning on all notifications, you will be. All right, let's get into ESPN's disaster with Dismal Disney. First, the MLB bombshell. On February 20th of 2025, The Atlantic broke it. ESPN and Major League Baseball mutually agreed to end their national TV deal after this season, axing 3 years off of the 2021 pact that really just feels like they signed yesterday, worth $550 million annually for 30 games, plus the home run derby and, of course, the wild card playoff games. ESPN itself triggered the out clause by March 1st after pushing to trim that tab per the Sports Business Journal, and MLB's boss, Rob Manfred, well, he didn't seem to mind. He leaked the memo, fumed over ESPN's minimal coverage beyond, well, the live games themselves, while ESPN spun it as fiscal discipline for their $25 to $30 a month streaming rollout this summer. This is a huge deal. Sunday Night Baseball, which is an ESPN staple and has been since 1990, it fueled a lot of revenue for their summer ads, at least, and Fox at a $730 million a year package, and TBS is at $470 million a year. Those are pretty rich slices that they have through 2028. And Apple is paying about $85 million and Roku about $10 million to nab smaller cuts of the games. Clay Travis actually talked about this, ripping ESPN for dumping baseball, yet paying $2.6 billion for the NBA, which everybody knows was too much money on something that's collapsing. They have $2.7 billion tied up in the NFL, and the MLB got squeezed out because Disney doesn't have the money anymore. And apparently they're going to have fewer and fewer viewers on top of that. Of course, it gets much worse, and as I mentioned during the intro, we have to talk about the fact that they're having their profits drop. If you look back in time at 2011, you had 100 million cable subscribers that took ESPN whether they wanted it or not. Now that number's down to 70 million households across the country, and it's only going down. So the books, as far as ESPN is concerned, is a grim tale indeed. Disney's Q1 2025 earnings, which was, back in February, not that long ago, pegged ESPN's operating income at $788 million. That's down 6% from $838 million a year ago, if you compare it year to year. That's on a $4.3 billion revenue stream. That's up just about 2%. And cord cutting is just going to keep killing these numbers. As I mentioned, 70 million homes get ESPN via cable, and that's down from 2020, which used to be around 84 million. It's only accelerating. Rights costs are going up exponentially, a crushing $2.7 billion yearly for the NFL, at least through 2032, which is 42% higher than it used to be. $2.6 billion for the NBA, which they overpaid for, as I mentioned before. And you got these college football playoffs that are extraordinarily expensive, especially as they continue to expand these playoff games. When you go back in time, ESPN had about Well, 2.9 billion in profits on a $16 billion revenue. Now, when you get around to Q4 of 2023 to look at it, it's 987 million. And another 6% slide is really starting to show the strain. And if you want to imagine that streaming is something that's important, you just pay attention to the fact that ESPN Plus, 24.8 million subs, is actually a dip of 2% since a year ago. There's no successful streaming here as of yet, at least when it comes to sports for Disney, and they're about to lose another major player, which we'll get into in a moment. The most frequent complaint, whether it be on X or somewhere else in social media, they've gone from doing analysis and breakdowns to shouting matches, which are basically entertainment for entertainment's sake. To use a fun colloquialism, I'll just say the cash cows grazing on thinner pastures these days, and, well, the lack of nutrition is starting to show. Now, of course, we have to get into the elephant in the room, and if you're looking for a good story about this, you need to walk over to That Park Place and check out their pro area, because, well, that VIP pro area is going to give you a lot that you may not find here, at least when it comes to the TKO talks around the UFC and the rights to broadcast it on ESPN. Because if you aren't aware, ESPN's $300 million a year UFC deal with TKO, which obviously that's actually owned by Endeavor, expires in 2025, which means this has got to get done if it's going to get done at all. And that was locked in all the way back in 2019. So about 6 years, not too bad. Talks right now are rocky. The UFC 313, which just happened, and again, I referenced a story, you could read about it over on That Park Place, that did not go well. That Vegas pay-per-view fight, the welterweight bout specifically, had an awful lot of glitches on ESPN Plus. There were buffering, audio cuts. The pre-show fans were just lambasting ESPN through X and other social media platforms, calling them Bush League. And if you pay attention to the big boys like Morgan Stanley, they're already hinting that ESPN's going to lose UFC to Netflix or Amazon, which seems likely considering the experience that Netflix has had with WWE already. And it would probably be easier to do business with one entity, at least for now, while you build your product up, so that maybe you don't have to rely on ESPN or any of these others in the future. To make matters worse, Mark Shapiro over at TKO, the big guy over there, was a little coy when he talked to Puck Media about the fact that he's eyeing rivals after Netflix's $5 billion deal with WWE and ESPN's grip slipping on a 9% income drop tied to the cable bleed, which is even more extensive than I even imagined. And of course, the UFC's 313 flop really didn't help the matter. WWE's premium live events are up next, and honestly, Disney's not in the lead. Worse yet, this isn't lost on any of the people who used to be fully engaged with ESPN as they start to talk out loud about the shrinking stage of ESPN as a whole, which it's hard to deny. As I mentioned before, it's more about entertainment than it is about sports any longer. And that's a trend that's been going on since they kicked John Skipper out the door. If I were a betting man, which we're going to talk about in a moment, I would say it's about a 50-50 coin toss at this point, whether or not Disney keeps UFC, overpays, or is just out of luck. But before we talk about sure bets, which Disney certainly wasn't, and that's really an important note to take, Stephen A. Smith threw everybody a curveball. Yeah, $100 million curveball, because on March 7th, The Atlantic dropped a 5-year, $100 million deal on our laps that Stephen A. was set to collect. Worse yet, it's an $8 million raise that allows him to talk a bit about politics. Oh, goody. That's exactly what we want to hear from our sportscasters. Politics. Regardless, the deal gives him, well, top earner status over there at ESPN, and he stays on First Take, but he ditches NBA pregame, gaining room to riff on politics. At least that's according to the New York Times, and I have no reason not to believe them. Smith's antics, I guess, are being rewarded here, and he touted about them, crowed about them all over March 7th's First Take program. saying, "It took too long, but I'm honored," hinting at broader ventures in the future. Now, I mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. This is terrible, terrible timing. ESPN has been going through a lot of belt cinching right now, and there are a lot of people that are out the door that didn't really appreciate the foot on their back as they did it. $100 million on one voice while you cut at least 20 talents that were axed from 2023 to, well, today. And it's not like these numbers are huge. First Take's got about 420,000 viewers on average, at least from April 2024 forward. And while that may have set records, $20 million yearly is going to heavily hit the profits. And remember, yearly profits down 6% across the board? That doesn't make a lot of sense. You got no MLB. You get Stephen A. Smith collecting $100 million. The priorities are allowing for politics and sports reporting. I don't know. I mean, if you're Disney, you're probably banking on his 5 million daily eyeballs, but that's kind of a tightrope, and not one I would want to be on right now when there are so many different tightropes to walk on at Disney. And finally, the worst bet of all. That's right. ESPN Bet is crumbling, and Penn is not just kicking itself, it's ready to kick the deal to the curb. And it didn't launch all that long ago, all the way back in August of 2023. It had a 10-year plan at $2 billion, and it was well placed and targeted, at least from the outside, initially looking to take down FanDuel and DraftKings, or at least get on the same podium with them. But Penn's CEO, Jay Snowden, admitted in the Q4 earnings call in 2024, it's got 2.35% market share across 20 states, and some of the big ones too. Somehow, I don't think that's in line with where they were projecting, which was 20% by 2027. That's 1/5 of the market. I wonder what they think about that plan now. Well, Penn's interactive unit, which includes ESPN Bet, has lost $109.8 million in the last quarter alone. And Snowden, again, the CEO over there, hinted at pulling the plug in 2026 when they get their 3-year out clause. Would anybody blame them? I know I wouldn't. Quoting Snowden himself, he says, "We were partnered with ESPN. We expected a podium spot. We're not on pace. Worse yet, Bettor's Insider actually penned this as a disaster for Penn." Play on words there. They took notice of the fact that the stock for Penn had tanked, cratered 32.69% since 2023. It's been a constant downward ride, and I don't know, maybe they're reconsidering some of their previous moves going back to Barstool Sports, which we'll get to in a second. Even Clay Travis has said that ESPN Bet is dragging everybody down, calling it a complete failure, pointing to Penn's botched Barstool sale, which they bought for $551 million, if you remember, and then sold back at $1. I'd take a break from pizza testing and jump back into the sports game, if you know what I mean. Penn's $1.67 billion revenue missed forecasts entirely by $133.8 million in net losses, which is substantial. Investors of S are really frustrated. H.G. Vora is actually pushing for 3 board seats now, slamming reckless spending, which is hard to argue with, like the ESPN deal. And I think that's being kind. Overall, the best decision here might have been made by Disney to remain as hands-off as possible, regardless of having their brand tied to Penn Entertainment's baby. But again, having your brand tied to this sinking ship isn't really a good look. Less than 0.1% of ESPN's app users are actually linked to the betting site, which defeats the whole purpose of this partnership to begin with. And in the most populous betting states, ESPN Bet is sitting at a dismal 7th place overall, at least as far as their revenue ranking goes. So I guess nobody's buying into Disney at all. And when they do, they seem to get hurt. Worse yet is Penn's tremendous plans for 2025, 2026. They sound a bit hollow. And ESPN Bet's regret that they are going to have to ditch, leaving Disney's sports betting dreams in the dust, which probably is a better situation for both of them. None of this sounds good, does it? So when you're watching this video, ask yourself several questions. What's ESPN's end game here? Do they have one? I mean, I know we're talking March 10th, 11th, 12th, whenever you're watching this video, but it's not busted. I mean, $788 million in profit last quarter is keeping it afloat, but the glory days are certainly faded, maybe a long way behind us. Disney's eyeing an ESPN stake sale, which we've heard about, gosh, almost 2 years ago now from Bob Iger himself. He told CNBC in 2023 that he's counting on NFL and MLB partners. Well, that would have been great, except you just kicked MLB to the curb with Kevin Mayer and Tom Staggs back to scheme. I mean, we were supposed to get something out of this, right? Ditching the MLB saves them what, $550 million a year? But it guts any kind of summer viewership that they were going to have. Those lazy summer day baseball games really kept people's attention and also sold some ads. And the summer ads were the ones that were worth watching, especially on a Sunday afternoon. I guess it could be worse. They could be performing more poorly against the actual collapse of cable, because that 6% decline just mirrors cable's collapse, or so they would like to have you think. Unfortunately, that 70 million households that you have linear penetration into are not going to compare to 2011's 100 million households. Those numbers are only going to go down, and they seem to be going down faster than anyone expected. TKO, with their UFC and WWE, they may be gone as well. So what are you actually selling? They have huge competition digitally in a space that they shouldn't have stepped into the first place as a streamer. I mean, Netflix spent $5 billion on the WWE. What could Apple spend? How about Amazon? I don't know, but it's a lot. And of course, Iger's own personal desire to get Disney ESPN into sports betting turned out to be a 2.35% flop. That's not good. The only thing they seem to have gained recently is an enormous contract for Stephen A. Smith to the tune of $20 million a year, an $8 million raise, which I would say probably wasn't well earned. And as I mentioned before, people want sports, not conversation. They want conversation about sports, but relevant. They don't want people yelling back and forth about politics, and they certainly don't want to dwell on aspects of the game that aren't entertaining. So why not focus back on sports? Maybe it's because you're not going to have very many. I think the decision to lose MLB was a big one, because last year, baseball saw a 6 or 7% bump, depending upon how you're taking a look at it. And that was significant. I remember back when ESPN was the worldwide leader. Now, I don't think they can use that name anymore. I could certainly mention them skipping out on the Big Ten or avoiding MLS, and those are significant properties, but I will say that their strategy is rather baffling. So maybe you could see my point. Disney, ESPN is collapsing, and they don't know how to fix it, but maybe you do. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. Let me know about UFC, baseball, the sports that you pay attention to, if you pay attention to any, and whether or not you think that ESPN taking this many shots and failing is going to result in disaster anytime soon. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands because it's good hygiene, and until next time, see ya. For real.